I do think this is like one of the most fascinating things of our eras. And I feel quite special to speak on this because I had like half of my childhood, I was forced to go outside and play with sticks. Then the other half, like I had the internet and Newgrounds and all that stuff. So I don't know. I feel like me and the people of my age had a pretty unique experience with the internet. But I do think that there is an element of the internet making lives a bit too easy to be able to find your group, you know? And like back when I was growing up, you were forced to become friends with people that like you didn't even like, or you had at least like get on the same level of understanding with them, you know? But nowadays with the internet, you just jump on and like everyone agrees with you. Like there's no anyone that disagrees with you, you push them out. You know, it's I don't think it's the greatest in terms of like social, but I'm not going on a rant right now.
There's got to be something different about the types of relationships that develop that leads to that loneliness, because the volume is there. The ease of it all is there. Like it was really hard to find people who were into the stuff that you were into in high school. For us, it was, you know, like I really liked woodworking stuff back then. I can't name a single person I knew in real life in the 90s who was my age who was into that. And that was fine. I wasn't like lonely for woodworking friends. But you know,
that'd be like, a good t-shirt to make for you. Lonely for woodworking friends.
But now I could probably find a Discord server with people who like talking about woodworking stuff and meet like dozens of teens who are also into it. Yeah, but it's so the ease is there and you'd think that would make it better. But if everybody is lonely, then something is fundamentally different about those interactions.
I would like to add to that. I think I share a very similar experience to that. Not with woodworking. I was coding back when I was younger, but it was really, really difficult for me to find other coders, especially like in the environment in which I grew up in. It was incredibly difficult. But I think that like everything has like a pro and a con to it, right? And I think the con was that like I was, you know, quite lonely in terms of like this hobby that I had. But the pro was that like I felt unique. I felt special. I felt like this quality that like it was rare for me to come across. And that I don't know, that was quite motivating for me when I was quite younger. Again, I'm not too read up on this. I don't want to make any like bold claims, but I do wonder if that has any element where it's just super easy to find a bunch of people that are like you. So it's hard to feel like motivated because you don't feel unique and special, you know, to keep going or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there is an element of being disposable.
Yeah.
That was never there in the past. And, you know, you say you don't want to rant on this, but you're really the perfect kind of person to talk about this kind of reality, at least to me, because you get the tech side of it in a really unique way. You get how AI works and where things are headed, but you also are firmly really grounded in that human element in a way that some of the younger people are not. Some of the more terminally online are not. And I think you've got to straddle both of those to really have a sense. You know, and Kevin's the same, at least to me, where he's got one foot in each of those two worlds. So I can see that discussion being perfectly appropriate. But Kevin, what do you think is different about those interactions as all of this stuff advances? Because, you know, if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, it wouldn't occur to us that you could take a picture of your face and deep fake something in 10 minutes. It's like impossible to identify as a fake. Whereas that's a little closer to reality now.
Yeah. I want to comment on something, Jabril, that you brought up that I had really never thought about before. And that is this element of, in the past, you could have that friend group that, maybe you don't have too much, maybe you have one thing in common and then that's it. And everything else is super different. But as a result, you also have one thing unique about yourself that you don't even really talk to with your other friends about, but that makes you feel special in a way that if you can just find 2,000 other people who not only also are into that, but are way better than you at whatever your interest is, or more dedicated or whatever, that conversely makes you feel bad. about it, perhaps in another kind of counterintuitive way. I think that is actually really interesting. I remember in high school, there was one kid who watched Dragon Ball Z that I could talk to about Dragon Ball Z. And we had one class together, and every day, he and I would just talk about yesterday's episode, and that was it. That was the extent of our friendship, was just, hey, we're the only two people who watched Dragon Ball Z in, 1997 or whatever year it was. So we're going to bond over that, and then that's pretty much the extent. But you can't really have that if you could just easily find a billion Dragon Ball Z groups, well, especially now where it's so ubiquitous as opposed to 1997. But the other thing that we have a really poor time evaluating, I think, is, and this has gotten so much worse because of COVID, is the value of just being in person, like actually spending time together in person, as opposed to through Discord, like we're chatting right now, or Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever it is. Just recently, I've gone to a couple of YouTube conferences or events, essentially, that gather different YouTubers. And Jabril, you and I ran into each other actually at VidCon briefly. There's a really big difference between seeing somebody in person. There's just this sort of intangible warmth that is hard to quantify, that you feel just being in the presence of someone physically, that you can never possibly simulate through a screen. And it sounds so boomer and like so, I don't know, it sounds so hokey to talk about, but it's absolutely undeniably true. It just is.
Yeah. And I would push back on the perception of it sounding boomer. I think that like older people serve a purpose in society for a reason, right? Because they have experiences that younger people don't have. And it's why, when you get older, naturally, you just become more conservative, because, you can't have society can't be driven by young people, right? Because there's so much they don't know. But yeah, 100%, I agree with you. There's so many things that are just like when we get on a Discord call, like the way in which we even think about interacting shifts completely, right? But if we're in person, there's so many different mannerisms and social cues that you pick up on, and it changes the way, for instance, I have no idea what you smell like right now, that would completely influence the way I interact with you, but 100%, I do agree. It's
like,
a different
hot
thing.
Dogs. I smell like hot dogs.
You smell like hot dogs.
You posted
a safe bet.
20 tweets about hot dogs in the last couple of days. I believe you.
Yeah. I have a question for both of you here, because as Jabrils, as you were talking about this stuff, I started to think about the friend groups in movies in the past. So is something like the boys in Stand By Me, or the Goonies. Like in the Goonies, you have the kind of goofy, dim-witted, overweight kid. He's got an identity. You've got Chunk. You've got Data, who's super creative and inventing things, and he's kind of off in his own world most of the time, but he's got an identity. You have Mikey with his own identity. And I think back to even something like the Babysitters Club. I don't want to make this entirely male centric here, but Christy was the bossy kind of president of that, whereas the vice president was an artistic type, right? So everybody had their own identity. And you were saying that people get to be, or they used to be able to get to be unique. And that's gone. Well, I feel like friend groups need that differentiation. And now, if you're dealing with people who are just like you, how do you do? Who are you when everybody is the same? If you went to an event and there were 50 people there, and everybody is wearing the same a t-shirt of the same band, that would be weird, but mentally, that's the kind of thing that seems to be happening. So is there, by bringing people together so easily, is there this paradox of erasing you in the process?
Yeah, I think so. I ground most of my thoughts in physics, the physics concept of entropy, right? Like everything has a positive and negative to it, right? And I do agree with you. Like when I was younger in my friend group, like it was very diverse in terms of like what our interests were, right? But not only did we all have the ability and opportunity to feel unique, we also had the ability and opportunity to feel useful, right? Like I was the computer guy. So if anyone had any computer issues, they'd come to me, right? We had another friend that was like really like intellectual. Like I don't know how in the hell he had the entire Wikipedia in his head. And we would go to him if there's like some concept we needed to hash out. You know, we had another dude that was like an athlete. So we'd go to him if there's anything like physically, whatever we needed to talk about or take care of. So it also gave us all an opportunity to feel useful as well to the friend group. And I do think that like that element is erased if you have a friend group that all are interested in this one thing, right? I could imagine that what would often happen is everyone would go to like the most useful person, like as often as possible. And everyone else that's under that perhaps like don't feel as useful. So that's one thing I do feel is erased, but I don't know, it's interesting. I think we're getting to something really interesting here with this podcast.